So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Startup Grind. We're privileged to have Jito Kayumba from Kukula, Zambia. This is Zambia's private equity and venture capital fund, one of the leading ones. He has made investments in numerous Zambian SMEs and actively participates in strategy and development. And he's also one of the board of directors with Airtel Zambia. Jito, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so at Startup Grind, it's our tradition to start from the very beginning. We would like to know, who is Jito?
All right, one thing I rarely do is talk about myself, so you put me on the spot. So essentially, I was born and raised here in Lusaka. When I was really young, I moved over to the Copper Belt in Ndola, where I went to the Sunset, a primary school over there, following the split of my parents. So that necessitated, my move over there. After living there until about grade 5, grade 6, I moved back to Lusaka to live with my father. Pretty much going to ISL. I must admit, I was a lackluster student. I was nothing, particularly special in school. I was okay. I was just coasting. I was a bit of a naughty kid. And then from there, towards the end of my high school, I essentially saw an opportunity to go to Canada to do the last year of my high school, as well as do my A-levels as well, similar to the Canadian version of A-levels. That's why I did that. Went on to university in Canada. So I lived in Canada for roughly just under 10 years.
Can I tell them about Canada?
I don't know what you know about Canada, so
Okay, so earlier today when I was trying to just get more information and detail about Jito, I stumbled across a YouTube video. He's actually done a movie before, as in he produced a movie in Canada.
Yeah, okay,
it's so on YouTube, just search for him.
Okay, just to give you some background on that. So I'd always been passionate about doing things that were impactful, that was shedding light on certain things, matters of social justice, particularly in the African American community. I was very close to, because as an African living in North America, you gravitate to a community that you're more likely to have similarities with. So I created that movie, number one, as a business opportunity, because I've always been a passionate businessman, and I realized that the stories, the different narratives that surround the African American community, the tumultuous nature, the different experiences that happen. I mean, if you look at the current situation with obviously Trump, having an issue with players taking a knee over their protests of police brutality. Those were realities that were there back then. It's just that there weren't any, there wasn't social media, phones didn't have advanced cameras. So these are narratives I got to know very, very personally, very well. And I was part of a boys and girls club there where we would be mentors. It was actually called the Big Brother club. So we would take on kids who essentially had fathers who were either in prison, who were selling drugs, and obviously were put away for a number of years, so they were misguided. So they had people who were in senior positions in the university establishment who would take them on as a big brother, and you would mentor them. So it was their stories that I was inspired by, that enabled me to create art. So that's the backstory around that movie. Yeah.
I hope we get to watch it as Zambians.
Eesh, that was like 10 years ago. So it's my life has evolved quite significantly from that particular time in my life. I mean, I was a kid, and that was probably the first taste of me realizing that anything is possible, that you can dream up something today, you can put a plan in place, and you can execute it and produce something extraordinary that people will be in awe of, but it's just really your passion and putting your heart and your focus into something. So, that's essentially how that came about, and that inspired me to do other things in future.
So after Canada, you came back to Zambia.
Yeah.
What was next?
Well, so just to reverse back to the days when I was a kid growing up here in Lusaka. The one thing I always recognize is the fact that I felt extremely privileged, because when you're born into a family that can provide you with the roof over your head, decent meals on the table, you feel privileged, given the fact that we are in a society that the vast majority of our fellow citizens live in poverty. So you feel privileged to even just sit in a car and be driven to school, and a decent school with a decent chalkboard and desks. I mean, it's as simple as that. And those are the things that I used to think about even while I was being driven to school as a 4 or 5-year-old. And you look out the window and you see kids, walking barefoot with tattered clothing, and you realize that there's nothing different between you and them. And there's just something inside of you, inside of me in particular, that felt very uncomfortable about that. And that inspired me to consistently think about ways in which I could be of impact and of value to my community. That's why, of course, going back to what we're talking about in Canada, me wanting to have a strong sort of impact on that community, because of holding on to that pain of seeing other people sort of in an underprivileged situation. And even once I moved back, just to address your question, I was keen to get into business, because I knew that I had, I guess, some sort of a gift of sorts of knowing how to assess the situation and how to put up infrastructure that creates value, that creates a business. I'd done that because I was privileged to meet a number of entrepreneurs who are highly successful. I was always drawn to highly successful people, and the first lesson I ever learned about success is that you are the average of the 5 people you associate yourself with. And the first multimillionaire I met, became a good friend of mine later, Simon Aboud. In fact, he's the one who essentially told me about the issue around associations. And then following that, I think one of the greatest lessons I learned was, before you embark on any journey, entrepreneurial or otherwise, you have to get to understand why you're doing something. Because it's the why that will take you through the storm, it will take you through any challenge. Because everything you do in life that is of a grand scale is always going to put you in a situation of pressure, challenges, failure, pain, and all that. And the only thing that will take you over that is the reason why you're doing something. If your life depended on you achieving something, you're highly likely to do it, to succeed, because your life depends on it. Or if the life of the person you love depends on it, you're likely to succeed. So for me, my why, my passion was coming from Sub-Saharan Africa, living in North America, having that in the back of my mind about the fact that we come from an environment that's highly impoverished, and me knowing that, even just 3-4 meals per day means that I'm privileged. I'm already in the 1 or 10% or in that scale. I realized that I have to, do something. I have to create some value. Otherwise, that discomfort is always going to sit with me. And speaking of discomfort, there's a lesson I also learned, is that, if the pain of staying the same is not greater than the pain of change, then you will never change. So that's one of the things, that I didn't want things to be as they were. I needed to do something that people could, not necessarily for other people, but that I know has touched enough lives in terms of changing the quality of life, creating some sort of an environment where people draw an income and so on. So this is why I naturally gravitated towards venture capital. But that, obviously, the venture capital bit happened after. So when I came back from Canada, and I was armed with all this knowledge, and based on the different mentors I had, and obviously that was my acculturation, my social intelligence and all that was created there, because I was there as a teenager going into my early 20s. It put me in a situation where there was a certain awareness, a societal awareness. And so I started working with my family. My family had a dairy farm at the time, and I just wanted to develop that. I wanted to raise capital to make that farm function in the most efficient manner. But the reality also is that part of Zambian culture is we have to respect our elders. If our elders have a different vision than we have, what they say goes, and your vision doesn't matter. So there's that intergenerational conflict. And that's, frankly, what was the case between myself and my family business. So because my vision could not take precedence in that business, I had to branch out elsewhere and seek other means of creating my own value, where I am a vision carrier, or at least I can work with like minds who can help me develop something that I feel is optimal.
Okay, so you're with Kukula Zambia. Could you just tell us when it was formed and what services you offer?
Being aggressive, being hungry, and that's the key thing, I was starving to do something significant. I needed to prove not only to myself, but also to the people around me who weren't particularly supportive of what I was trying to do, that I could make it on my own, that I could make big things happen based on the precedence that was set in Canada. I mean, when you allude to the point of the movie, I know it's a small sort of snippet of my past, but to me it symbolizes, what ingenuity does, what passion does. You can have an idea, you can set it in motion, and you can have a product at the end of the day. And I was able to that was my first profitable venture that I ever did in my life. So that sort of enabled me to realize that whatever I do when I come back to Zambia is going to be successful. Of course, I had a number of failures, but which I'll maybe touch on a little bit. So I ventured into milling. I set up a little milling business. It was profitable. It was a very small scale, but it was for me. I needed to understand the Zambian marketplace, to understand the people, the manner in which the distribution networks are within the city of Lusaka. I used to spend time in the city market, knowing how the traders operate, the different supply chain sort of fundamentals. And after understanding that, I scaled up into trucking. I became a relatively successful trucker, but my heart wasn't there. The question I used to ask myself, even one of my mentees in Canada, who was a little, I think he was like 10 at the time, his dream was to be one of two things: either a sports person, whether it be, I think it was American football or basketball, or a rapper, because those are the only two things you could succeed at as a person of African descent in North America, because that's the example of who succeeds is in those two disciplines. And for me, what I was always fascinated with as a kid, watching business news, is the people with suits and ties talking about these numbers that are flicking past, the Dow Jones Industrial. That, to me, that was very attractive. And I became a bit of a nerd moving forward. I started studying that thoroughly. I just wanted to understand it. Even while I was doing the other ventures I was doing, I wanted to understand finance. I wanted to understand what is the most impactful thing I can do within my economy, as in Zambia, and who are the most powerful people in any economy in the world. And I realized that the most powerful people were financiers, because nothing happens without finance. Everything we're touching, from our clothing to the shoes, this building, the food that's being prepared, it's all driven by finance. And of course, finance comes in different forms, through banking institutions, private equity firms, angel investors, people who save, applying that finance. So I realized that I need to channel all my energy into an environment where I could deploy capital, and I could capitalize businesses, grow those businesses, become a beneficial owner of those businesses, and of course build my own wealth as a result, because I recognize that I had this sort of hunger to become wealthy, and the reason is I knew that I wanted to be a blessing to others, because if I can build my own wealth, then it means that I would be able to channel at least a significant portion of that into creating value, into creating good social value. And the other sort of element I wanted to mention throughout my entire journey, it's highly unsophisticated. It's very simple. I don't want people to feel like it's not something that's relatable to them. The fact is, I was extremely fortunate. I deliberately mentioned that I was a lackluster student when I was a kid. Obviously, it's because of an interest. I just didn't have the interest until much later, and then I really excelled. But the point is, as I was being driven towards what I do now, there were certain coincidences, certain serendipitous moments and people that came into my life that added so much wisdom to me and built me up in such a way that I felt like it was undeserved grace, if you will. And I realized that, and that's how I found God, essentially. I realized that everything that I was doing was being deliberately placed in my path by something that I didn't control. I knew that what was in my heart to do big things and great things was being fueled by the fact that God obviously, I guess my interpretation, maybe my humble interpretation, is that He wanted me to be successful so that I can go out and do things that whether it be create jobs, help people who are less privileged, and so on. So and that's the reason I've been so lucky, because even the way I met my business partners, the way I met all sorts of investors, the way I became acquainted with people who are extremely powerful. I mean, I remember I was a 25-year-old kid, and at the time, President Banda was the president of the country, and I of course, I was a very pushy person, very persistent, very aggressive. And he was the head of state, and he became a mentor of mine during the time that he was running the country. And it opened up my mind in a big way. And I know that the serendipity of that took me to another level, which enabled me to encounter other people who took me to another level. So I stand on shoulders of giants, really. So it's not necessarily my own effort, because if you get to know me, the person I am, I'm extremely shy. I'm not really that special. I'm not smarter than anyone. I know people in this room who are 10 times smarter than I am. I saw Dr. Musariri over there, extremely sharp guy, and many other people who are highly intelligent. I don't know. Oh, goodness. That's another guy who's insanely smart. And, and these are people who I feel I can leverage to also build my own organization. And I know that, because I get asked lots of questions. How did you build this massive business? How did you ascend to a directorship of one of the largest companies in the country? This is incredible, at this particular age. And I said, I can't explain it, because I think it was completely God's grace. So I have to give it up to him. It's really where it came from. I was just really in the right place at the right time, with the heart in the right place, and being given all the tools necessary to take me to that point. So that's what essentially what came into the Kukula system. I know my answer is a little bit of a bit of circumlocution, but everything has a bit of a backstory. So when I run into my business partner, Tua Anderson, he's a Danish kid looking to do venture capital in Zambia. He had a source in Denmark. There's a development finance institution who was willing to put up a certain amount of money and needed local people who had the same sort of vision, same mindset. And when we were kindred spirits, when we came together, we realized that this is a match made in heaven. And he had certain skill sets that I didn't have, and I had skill sets that he didn't have. And so did some of the other individuals that we brought on board. And of course, there's a lot of difficulty in the beginning, because Zambia did not recognize venture capital as an asset class. The Securities Exchange Commission only recognized listed securities, unit trusts, things of that nature. So we had to essentially lobby the government to create this venture capital sort of legal framework, so that if we register our fund with the Securities Exchange Commission, they would essentially recognize it, so that when we go out to the investors, because investors need to see good governance, they need to see that there's a good legal structure, and with that, you're able to raise capital, in the international sort of investor network. So there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, we were small. We're a little office of 4 or 5 of us. At this point in time, our sort of team, it's roughly about 25. We've created about 500 jobs. We've deployed a little over, through our fund directly, a little over $15 million in this republic, and we've now, I mean, this has been, we're talking about 5-6 years, that we've been doing this consistently, and highly determined, highly focused to create this brand as Kukula Capital, as a venture capital entity, but also to be an institution that is highly respected. Like I mentioned, well structured, and that's able to really not only deploy capital but raise even more capital to do bigger projects. So that's really the sort of long version of my answer towards how Kukula Capital came together.
Okay, and what services does Kukula offer? All
right, so the way we, I wouldn't term it as a service. It's more of our business model is that we do venture capital. Now, just to answer what I get asked, and there's nothing wrong with this. I don't believe there's anything as a dumb question, because I ask dumb questions all the time, and it enables me to build my knowledge base. So venture capital is a business model that where a financial institution or a person with money is able to invest in a company and take shareholding in the company, as opposed to lending, which essentially means that you place funds in a company and you don't have any shareholding, but they're responsible for paying you back. In this particular case, we place funds in those businesses where we, like I mentioned, we get a shareholding, and we share the risk with the entrepreneur who founded the business. Similar to, I mentioned, Moana, we invested in .com Zambia.
I saw that $500,000.
Yeah.
Was it? You're my new friend.
Yeah, there was a list of the most successful young Zambian entrepreneurs, and he happened to be number one. So it seems that the money. Anyway.
Okay, so how does a company qualify to access a venture capital?
Okay, that's a very good question, and it's a very important question because ultimately that's what I'm here for. Because I don't want to talk just about myself because I really feel like I don't matter in this equation. What matters is how entrepreneurs can access capital. I alluded to the fact that capital and finance is such an important aspect of any economy, any entrepreneurship venture, from a startup to an existing entity, even the large businesses. We're talking businesses as large as Barclays Bank, Airtel, and so on. First Quantum Minerals, they take capital on a regular basis from various financial institutions, hedge funds, venture funds, and private equity funds, and so on. So the way you qualify to get venture capital is you have to look into what the venture capitalist is looking for. So me, as a venture capitalist, I have to, when I assess an opportunity, the number one thing I look at is the person. If somebody walks through my office or I meet somebody at a cocktail or somewhere, the first thing I need to gauge is their integrity, their capacity as a person. Being a human, because at the end of the day, every business is driven by the human being. We only talk about Apple because of what Steve Jobs did. We talk about Google because of what the Sergey Brin and the other guy did, and Zuckerberg and Facebook and so on. It comes down to the person first of all. Before you even look at the key fundamentals of each business, from the numbers to the business plan to the market to all these things that are somewhat of a complex sort of cacophony of factors. So with a person, I feel number one is integrity. If you feel that this person is trustworthy based on their reputation, because you do, there's different ways in which we do due diligence. In the very beginning, I didn't know that, and that's another thing about any form of business is you have to over time you build more competence. You build skills to assess ways in which you create value within your own sector, regardless of what business you do. So with regards to integrity, I've developed the means to sense, to feel people out, their energy, to feel what their why is. Why are they doing this business? Are they going to quit at the first challenge? Are they, if we invest $2-3 million in a company, are they going to run off to Dubai with their girlfriend and blow it on a Lamborghini or something? You want to know that these are people who have a sound mind, that appreciate good governance, and that's the second piece. Is governance. I think corporate governance, which encompasses, it mostly evolves around a board of directors who symbolize oversight in the company. Obviously, you mentioned that I'm a board member at Airtel, and one of my jobs there at Airtel, on behalf of the shareholders, mostly the majority shareholders in India, they're the ones who asked me to take up that position, is to take charge of the company from the perspective of keeping the management team accountable, making sure that they're fulfilling their obligations, that they're fulfilling the requirements of their mandate, that the financial aspect of the business is being run properly, that the chief financial officer is keeping the management accounts up to date, that these are consistently coming through every month, leading up to the annual audit, that there's a proper audit done. So we scrutinize things of that nature for the sake of the sustainability of the business. And that's really what governance is all about. It's about transparency. It's about oversight. It's about checks and balances. It's about ensuring that there is no abuse of funds in the company, and that there's clear reporting channels between the management team, the board, and all the other sort of stakeholders in the business. From a regulatory perspective, even like at Airtel, what I spend a lot more time doing is making sure that the business is keeping compliant with ZICTA, with Bank of Zambia because of Airtel Money, with who else? There's a few other regulators that sort of cover, ZICTA being the main one, and Luce because it's a listed company. So, and that's what a board does, and that's why I always ensure, and I must commend, I think Njava is Njava. Is he here? Oh, there you are. Njava impressed me because there's, I think, a day we ran into each other, and I told him that. He asked me, so what are the things I need to do as an entrepreneur to make my business operate properly? I told him, get a board. And he's like, a board? What the hell is a board? I don't want to have a board. But then, like a year or two later, he's got a board in place. A very nicely structured board, and I'm very proud of that because, and you know what? And that's what I used to be. I used to be teachable. My mentors would tell me, if my mentor told me, for you to become successful, if you want to be a billionaire, you need to, hop on one leg from here to Kablonga. Trust me, I'd do it, because if he tells me that it's gonna make me successful because he's already there, I just believe that. And so and that's, I think, another important criteria for particularly young startups is to have a view to abide by the guidance of established entrepreneurs. So that's the reason why good corporate governance and having a board in place is important. The third, I think I already mentioned issues of
integrity.
Sorry?
You said integrity.
Yes,
corporate governance.
Yes, integrity, corporate governance, which I guess encompasses the issue around financial statements. That's also very important. Keeping financial records is important because we need to, and it has to be audited, because I could generate financial statements myself, and and I could manufacture my EBITDA, my profit after tax, all that stuff. But if it's audited by a reputable audit firm who have to abide by international financial services regulations, then naturally, it's believable, because these are governed by these international institutions. The last piece is the business plan, and that's in order of importance. The business plan, everyone wants to make it shiny, make it super nice, and throw in all sorts of colors, and they get the right font. We don't care about that. We've invested in businesses without even looking at business plan. I don't think we looked at .com's business plan. But there's numerous other. In fact, I'll give you another business. So .com definitely is a good case for where you look at the entrepreneurs' values, and you look at their energy, their intelligence, the innovation that they were bringing to the table. With corporate governance, one of the deals I'm very proud of, because I really run through that deal entirely from A to Z, was the Betanal Finance deal, which is it's a local microfinance company. It's actually the fastest growing microfinance company in Zambia. It grew by 113% from the time we invested till now, and its balance sheet has just quadrupling. It's insane. It makes me proud of what I do, because at the end of the day, investing, yes, we want to make money. We want to make a return that through the dividends of the companies that we're sitting in, through the capital appreciation. But seeing the fact that the number of jobs that can be created in that, and just the skills development, we infuse a certain culture of excellence, of consistency, of attaining certain levels of production that under normal circumstances won't be implemented. That are similar to a big multinational. Like, obviously, I've had the privilege, being on the Airtel board enables me to see how a large company runs, and knowing how the different cogs, the different organizational sort of setups enable it to create the value that it creates. So essentially, governance and all that is important. There's another piece. So I was talking about the business plan. For me, the key area is, fine, it's nice to forecast how much can be made, and seeing how you can validate that, and seeing how well you understand your market. For me, if you understand your market well, and you are able to articulate your value proposition well, to me that's enough. You don't have to go into too much details on the executive summary of who the entrepreneurs are. Of course, that's already covered on the personal side of the entrepreneur. But it really comes down to market, and how do you address that specific market who you're looking to serve, and the value you're going to create from them. Because when you look at money and how it's made, it's an exchange of value for cash. So you have to really measure to what extent is this value being produced, and how can we replicate that, how can we scale that. That's really what it comes down to on the business plan.
Okay, so what is the process like? Do you go out there looking for SMEs, or is it startups, or do they come to you?
Yeah. It's a combination of both. So there's numerous occasions where people have come through us. It's a lot rare that people come to us and then we invest in them. So it's always us looking out. And for me, I always have a wish list of companies I want to invest in. There's some businesses, I don't want to say which ones, which I always keep an eye on, keep a very close eye on, and say, this is going somewhere. I'm just waiting for it to get to a certain level so that it fulfills our internal criteria for investments, based on what the turnover of the company is. And so in terms of the procedure. So if I meet, and for example, I meet Dr. Musuri over there, he's got a great business called iVitals, right? You already went through different rounds of investment, I think in Holland or something like that, won competitions. So you're ticking a lot of boxes in terms of attracting, mentorship and incubation from various institutions globally, and then you watch it scale, because you want to get it to scale to a certain point, because I don't invest anything less than $500,000. I'd rather invest, because the amount of work it takes to do a $2-3 million deal, or even a $10 million deal, is the exact same amount of work it takes to do a $10,000 deal. The amount of due diligence, the amount of, which is the key part, is really commercial, legal due diligence, assessing the market viability and so on. And it's, so the scale of and the quantum of the amount to invest in has to be, and the audience, has a business opportunity that is incredible, that I could look at based on the fact that I'm here speaking about this, then it's a deal, So
I really hope that you will invest in someone's business here.
I'm sure it will happen one day. I believe in the power of the tongue, so what we say does come to pass. So the thing that I was on a radio show recently, and again, very not common for something I do, and I talked about the different stages of competence, and one of the things that we really value as Kukula in entrepreneurs is focus. When an entrepreneur is focused on their value proposition, that is that thing that they do that enables them to make money, whatever it is they're producing. If, for example, there are people who are extraordinary at what they do. I mean, there's a restaurateur. We invested in this company. It was an angel investment. So aside from Kukula, I love doing angel investments, where an entrepreneur has a great little business and they just need not too much, something that's way below the Kukula threshold. Me and my partners say, hey, let's do it. One example is there's a restaurant at Acacia Park called Chang Thai. It's a Thai restaurant, and we invested in that 2-3 years ago. And we did that not because of, obviously you want to make a nice return, but because that entrepreneur is a restaurateur. He's focused on it, he's passionate, he loves it, he does a great job, and we were able to realize a return from it, and we essentially exited that. And so going back to the point of focus is when you do specifically, so let's say you produce water, you've got a water purification plant, and you focus on doing that, but at the same time you've got a chicken run. This other side you've got a company where you trade, you supply government, you supply the military boots, and which is a lot of Zambian entrepreneurs want to moonlight. They want to do 10 different businesses. But the most successful people in the world are people who focus on one business, one line of business. If you look at every billionaire on the Forbes list, they all became that way because of one business. Of course, you can diversify once you've made all that money. Then you can place money. I mean, I don't run .com. I don't run Better Finance. I don't run Post.net, which obviously we're shareholders in, and all these different the nine different companies in our portfolio. But they're run by entrepreneurs who we invested in. So it doesn't take my management time. What I'm focused on is my venture capital, is raising capital, is deploying capital. To me, that's all I do. And that's what enables me to be refined in what I do. So it's the same thing for entrepreneurs. They need to be focused on their value proposition and focus on one, do it right. If you're going to do logistics like Musanga, you want to focus on Musanga. You want to do that perfectly. And what will then happen is that, like anything in life, when there's repetition, when there's consistency, you'll become a master at that. And mastery is followed by a lot of money, essentially. And this is empirical. I'll tell you. In fact, something that those of you who've heard me speak before have heard me say this. I love the 4 stages of competence. When you embark on any business or anything you're doing, even if you're a sports person, whether you're Beyonce, whether you're Ronaldo, whatever you do in your life, you start by being unconsciously incompetent. So that essentially means that you are not aware of what you're not aware of. You don't know what you don't know. If I'm a chicken farmer, I start today, and then I've got a whole bunch of chickens, and they hatch, or chicks, and they hatch from the eggs, and then they all die tomorrow. Then that's me being faced with the reality that I needed to maybe create a certain environment, a certain incubation, maybe put in some veterinary services and medicine and so on to enable them to survive their first night. So that's me realizing that I did not know what I did not know, even though I'm looking to be a chicken farmer. That is when most people quit. They start one venture, they quit because they become knowledgeable of what they didn't know, and then they try to do something else. The next step, if you continue, if you persist on that focus, that line of business, you move into what we call conscious incompetence. So you're now aware that you don't know. So you now know, like, okay, I need to humble myself. I don't know. I need to learn, which is an important point. Is that you now seek mentorship. That's the point where mentorship matters. That's the point where specialization matters. That's where you bring in talent. That's when you bring in people who can guide you on how you do this and that. If I'm processing tomatoes, the people who've done it elsewhere can come show me, because I don't need to know the things I'm doing. Like, we're investing in energy now. I'm not a hydrologist or electrical engineer, but I'm actively involved in a hydropower development. Because I'm able to leverage on the skills of other people, I just bring all the stakeholders together, I bring the money, and that's essentially that. The third step on the road to achieving optimal competence is conscious competence. So from you being aware that you're not aware, and from you essentially now become aware because you've been learning, you've been talking to mentors, you've been applying. And this happens over years. It doesn't happen overnight. That's another thing entrepreneurs need to understand, is that success is not an overnight thing. Anyone who's basking in glory has sweated, cried, and been, gone through all that for years. I mean, I can tell you, I've definitely been through a lot. We've lost a lot of money, we've burnt our fingers, but you make it through. Once you've gone through your stage of being consciously competent, that's where the factor. I mean, there's some books that were written about mastery, 10,000 hours, things of that nature. That's where you apply that, and then over time, you reach unconscious competence. Now, that's a very special place to be, because you become so great at what you do that it's second nature. You don't even think about it. You can wake up in the middle of the night and interpret or do. So let's say whether you're a baker or you are a investment banker, whatever, that it's so ingrained in your psyche that there's no way you won't know how to answer a question. You've basically ticked every box necessary to have knowledge on how to do what you're doing, and that's where most people and most billionaires that I know who are mentors have achieved unconscious competence, and they don't even work as hard because they've been through all that, so they can do things more efficiently. They can leverage themselves. They use other people to do things for them, whether it's a multinational business with different branches in different countries. So it's because of how well you know business. So if you're I remember the time when I was a trucker and I was learning things, I got to a point where I knew that if a truck is going to Nakonde taking maize, I knew that, okay, this is the kgs, this is the fuel, the distance is this. So automatically I knew that, if a driver tells me he needs fuel when he gets to Mpika, I know he's lying. He's probably sold the fuel, because I've already gotten to a point where I understand the consumption, I understand all the different factors. Even, if it's in the hot season, I know that there's a certain, the road is hot, so the tires swell, and there's all these factors that, and different nuances that help you understand certain procedures in the business. So that's why focus is key in achieving pure unconscious competence, and that's what every entrepreneur should strive to do, is to reach unconscious competence. Here in Sub-Saharan Africa, we have young economies. Most of us are just under 50 years, roughly 50 years old. From a free market perspective, we're about 25 years old. I mean, Zambia, we became free market around 1991. So we're young. We can say, fine, we've made mistakes. We're still learning the game of entrepreneurship, but we have to now optimize. We have to move to a different phase. And this is why I love what I do, is creating this platform in which entrepreneurs can have access to finance to achieve this level of success, where they are now taking control of the economy. Because this country, if you look at the economic picture, you've got your micro businesses. The majority of Zambians, from a demographic perspective, are in the micro space. We're talking marketeers, we're talking Kantemba owners, one-man briefcase business people, and so on. They occupy the micro. Then you've got the middle, which is missing. So we're talking about the mid-sized businesses, turning over maybe $1 million or so kwacha per year. Then you've got the multinationals, who are essentially your Airtels, your Barclays, and companies of that nature. And obviously, that particular middle needs finance, and that's those. If you look at Europe, if you look at North America, even successful parts of Asia, the middle is the largest, and that's what drives the economy. It's the fuel of the economy, and the value they create, generates strong GDP numbers. If you look at Sub-Saharan Africa, we only contribute a single percent to global GDP, which is completely embarrassing. And we need to change our culture and the manner in which we execute. We need to infuse more discipline in our procedures. We need to have a greater sense of urgency, a stronger work ethic to really produce at a much more advanced rate. Otherwise, the world will continue to outdo us, outperform us, and we'll continue to wallow in the poverty that we've been wallowing in for the last 5 decades. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to the startups, how do you quantify the value of a business? And then how, when you invest, do you invest like, okay, so 50% of the shares of this company now belong to Kukula?
Yeah.
How does it work?
Okay, so with valuation, there's a number of models. You have to, it also depends on the sector. If you're in a tech space, so you have, okay, so I'll start with the most basic one. You look at future cash flows and you discount them by a certain factor based on the particular sector. So, and when it comes to equity investing, you have to assess the value of it basically on the business's potential to make money. And every business is rooted in its assets. And an asset is essentially just something that makes a business money. So a truck to a trucking company is an asset because that asset is what would essentially do the transport that would essentially result in a client paying money. So now the way we look at it is you don't look at most people assume it's the assets that make you value the business. I remember one time we were looking at a glass plant. And it's a very expensive glass plant. I mean, there was so many factors put in place, but if you look, all we cared about. So the owners of that business were saying, well, we invested $25 million in this glass plant, so therefore the value of this business should be $30 million to include sweat equity because of the time and effort we put into it. But investors don't care about that. They care about, does this glass plant have the capacity to not only utilizing its current machinery and also leveraging a value chain and supply chain, taking in some silica and all these other inputs that enable it to churn out glass. And what matters more is what is the EBITDA going to be of this business over the next 5 years based on the market, what the pricing is, and so on. So we value businesses based on future income. Because an investor, when you're buying into a company, I mean, if I'm going to buy into my own business, I'm buying into its potential to make money, its potential to generate cash flows, because that's really at the end of the day what matters. So that's probably the number one way of measuring viability. You do factor in the value of the assets as well to a certain extent when you're negotiating, because obviously it's a moving target. There's also a way of analyzing from peers. So if let's say in South Africa, there was a trucking company that had 200 trucks that had a certain amount of, let's say that a contract with Lafarge down there, and that company was valued at $50 million. If a company in Zambia with the same clientele, making the same amount of money, has the same fleet, and we can use the precedence of that deal to guide us in how to value this company. So there are various valuation models. They're highly technical because you throw in the weighted average cost of capital, the NPV, the EBITDA. So obviously it's a bit of a I guess I don't want to go into my nerd side because I always people will start sleeping. So so that's on the valuation side. What was the next question? Sorry.
So when you invest, how much of the company do you?
Okay, so valuation is important because it now determines what shareholding we're going to get. In simple terms, if you value a business, this is a $10 million business, and we say, okay, we're going to invest $5 million. Naturally, 5 million of 10 million is 50%. Naturally, it means that our equity in the business should be 50%. In some cases, we split it between debt and equity. So we can say, okay, fine, this business, for it to scale to the next level, it needs $5 million, but the entrepreneur is being tight on the equity and said, no, I don't want to give up 50%. I've got my kids, I've got my wife, So what I need to do is take 30%, let whatever that 5% amount that 20% be, let that be the debt component. So we'll service that, like any other debt, like we would get with a bank, maybe at a more concessional rate, because you don't want to impede the business's capacity to progress. So that's really in simple terms how valuation works, and how we use valuation to determine the shareholding is pro rata. It's relative to the valuation and relative to the money that's going to the business.
So in other words, you're still getting 50, but they will pay back to get back the 20%?
No, actually, no. We would be getting 30, but the 20% would be in the form of debt. So it's like going to a bank to borrow money. The bank won't take shareholding. They obviously take collateral or something, and we'll do something similar. But because we'd be shareholders, there are, apart from venture capital, there's also mezzanine debt, which essentially takes shares as collateral. And it's a special type of loan facility where you ring fence some of the receivables or some of the future income of the business, that enables you to be protected and to ensure that you are, getting your money that you lend into the business based on the business's cash flows that you tap into.
Okay. Yeah. What are your thoughts about the Zambian startup scene currently, the landscape?
I think it's exciting. You find that a lot of people are passionate about getting a business off the ground, but not a lot of people are knowledgeable of what they need to do. I think a lot of people are lacking in focus. I think there are areas where someone is doing something not wholeheartedly. So I think we need to have a greater degree of passion in the way we get our business together. There's a lot of examples of people who are passionate, who've proven that you could be a startup and you could create a business. I mean, obviously, sorry to name drop you a lot, Mano, but you're an example where you start a business on your own, you identify a niche in the market, you identify a problem, and you create that business that serves, or at least solves that problem. And that's what businesses are, is you're solving problems. And you go in all in, and you prove the concept. And had that concept not been proven, would not have gone in, because it's proven by the track record, by the historical revenues, by certain systems that are in place. And the one thing, unfortunately, we don't do, which I have to mention, is that we don't invest in businesses that have never turned over any money at all. We have to, because the 80% of startups fail. I mean, that's just a global statistic. So we need to invest in businesses that have some sort of validation of their viability. We will invest, energy, that's greenfield, that's startup, but you have a ready consumer who's ready to buy your power, and that's obviously Zesco and a regional market. And also with legal, obviously you have to get it right on the legal side when you have power purchase agreements. So it's basically locking a client. So before I even build my plant, I'm already coming to you saying, you will buy this power at this price. Do you agree or not? If you agree, you sign. And then of course I can use that to enable my power plant to be bankable. Investors will pour money in, we set it up, connect, and and of course hopefully you'll pay me on time. So that's the only case when a startup is easily viable, is easily recognizable as being viable, is when there's a fixed client. Sometimes, there's some entrepreneurs we've told that, look, if you can get the likes of ShopRite or whatever, let's say you're supplying food, to basically not prepay but guarantee that they'll buy a certain amount from you, that puts you at a slightly better sort of circumstance that would enable you to attract venture capital.
But no, my question was with regards to exits as an investor. Seeing as the capital markets in Zambia, not only Zambia but in sub-Saharan Africa, are not that active, how do you typically get your exits, and how is that typically played out so far?
Okay, that's a guy who's done a bit of research. So, venture capitalists, private equity funds make the bulk of their money when they exit the business. So when you go into a business, you make dividends, right? And that's the first way, But the second way is when you leave the business. So if I come into Lusanga with $1 million, right? My hope is that the valuation of the business will grow in the duration of time that I'm in it to a certain level where if I exit, I'm exiting with $5 million, which is possible. It happens all the time. This is, that's the business model of venture capital. There's 3 exit mechanisms that are viable in Zambia. The first, probably most attractive exit mechanism is a trade sale. A trade sale is when you sell the company, but you have to agree with the entrepreneur, where you sell the entirety of the business to a competitor. We've seen big trade sales in Zambia. In the 90s, there was a company called Amanita. It was started by a guy called Diego Gasili. He sold it to Zambi it became Zamenita, made a whole lot of money. Of course, he was able to do a bunch of other things. So that's an example of a trade sale, and that's how we would set up the business to be exited properly. And this is why when we come in, our interventions include corporate governance, putting in certain systems so that when an investor is coming to do a due diligence, everything's in place, because we already have the mindset of the same investors who come in to do due diligence. So we're already preparing it for an exit, and this is what we do with all the businesses we're in. So that's number one, trade sale. There's numerous other examples of trade sales. You know, Telecel was a trade sale. It was a little telecom company. MTN came and bought them out, obviously as a way of entering the market. And market entry trade sales are also very common. And a whole bunch of others. We sold a business, a beef company, to a German competitor about 3 years ago. So that's number one. Number two is an IPO. IPO is an initial public offering. That's where you take the company public. You take it to the Lusaka Stock Exchange, and the investors, who are people like you and I, the public, buy that company. That's also another mechanism in which you can make a lot of money. There's a guy, a friend, well, I guess I say friend, but some of these guys are compared to me at Bali's, you know. Like Lawrence Sekutwa, it was a partial exit with Madison, listed I think about a year or two ago. And that's an example of an IPO. IPOs can be very successful. And the Zambian capital markets, and I'll share with you a secret, I didn't touch on it, but the game is changing in such a crazy way. This year has seen the reconfiguration of the investment guidelines of NAPSA. That's big. It's the biggest fund in Zambia. It's roughly a $4 billion fund. And they traditionally invest in listed equities and all sorts of things. Now they're looking to open up into private equity and others. So private equity fund managers are extremely excited, because it means we have a new stream of local funds that we can manage into our funds, that we can mix with our own as well as international investors. Now, NAPSA have been known to underwrite. So let's say, let's use your case, right? In Musanga, you build the company into a massive scale, it becomes a $15 million company, and then you decide that you want to exit or you want to take it public. Because there's a company, I even tell you openly, we're going to take public, and that's Better Now Finance, where you basically go to the market after evaluation, you basically put out a prospectus, you do your marketing, you do all that to sensitize investors on the viability of this particular company, and then they buy out your shares through the primary phase of the IPO. And then of course the secondary sale is basically where so I could sell my shares in whichever holdings I have on the stock exchange to you or to others. So that's another very good mechanism. The third is a secondary sale. This is also common. So international private equity fund managers are coming into Zambia bit by bit, because now they've seen that, this works. When we came into this market, there wasn't any other venture capital company. There was nothing. And most of them were international. They did the Golden Lay deal, they did the Monday Hill deal, they did all these different deals were happening, but these were foreign companies. But there was nothing that was locally domiciled. We are the only ones essentially that are locally domiciled. And with that, we've seen that companies are now looking at utilizing us, knowing that we're in these businesses. They know that, you're in this, let's say if a tech firm like Jumia, which is the only African unicorn, and unicorn essentially means it's a company that's valued over $1 billion, in the tech space in most cases. If they want to buy .com, for example, right? For $50 million, right? Maybe we can sell, right? And obviously they're backed by PE fund, and that's a mechanism in which they enter markets. So in a way, secondary sales on private equity is happening. We're actually just in the process of doing one right now. It's looking good. So those are three mechanisms, and they're sound. They've already been proven, and they're right. So I think exits for both the value to the venture capitalist as well as the entrepreneur who set up the business is very extremely high on all the different exit mechanisms. That's a very good question.
My name is Jito Kayumba. I own a startup that's focused on empowering, an ICT company that's focused on empowering people in the agriculture sector. So I first knew about Kukula Capital because of the telecom Zambia investment. And my question is, do you think ICT would be the unique area that your firm can make a huge difference in? Thank you. I was going to ask about exits, but he took me in one.
All right. The thing about ICT is it's ubiquitous. It is everywhere. Our lives are now governed by ICT. Being exposed to an electronic platform, whether it be your phone and other devices. So we believe in the future of e-commerce in Zambia, and for that simple reason, it's a great place to be in. Agriculture is also another very attractive sector. So, the fact is, we have a rapidly growing population. We grow at a net rate of 3% per year. Our urbanization is 4% per year. So you find that anyone who's going to be involved in ICT, so essentially what that means is that cities are now going to be inhabited by much more people, not only by way of people being born every year, but also by migration from rural areas into urban areas. And the more you come into, I know this, through the Airtel business, I know issues around coverage, ICT access, and so on. E-money and so on. We're all trying to position ourselves to capitalize off that. So I think that's a great place to be in. And something you said, I think is something I should have also mentioned as an important criteria for a lot of investors, is you talked about empowering, and those are good words to use when you're looking to set up to create a business. You want to create value. Of course, you also want to make money. You want to have business sense, and you want to do good at the same time. Investors also look at what we call ESG. I already alluded to governance. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. Social is very important. If an attractive opportunity comes to us and we realize that there's only let's say it's overly mechanized, we can only create 2-3 jobs, but of course on the commercial side we can make a great return. It's a lot less attractive to us. We have to invest in things that have high value, high social return. We're excited about, there's a dairy we're working on in the Northwestern Province. We're just about to finalize that. That's obviously in the agriculture sector. And agriculture is a very labor-intensive sector. So from a social perspective, that's something we do not ignore. It's also important to highlight that whenever an entrepreneur is bringing a proposal, is to say, look, this is my social value. We're creating X amount of skills. This is the development of the capacity of the local community we're creating. And it's just the feeling of knowing that a job means, and particularly because of the nature of African culture, means that you're always going to be, if you are privileged to have a certain amount of income, you're going to be taking care of a lot of people. Many people probably have relatives in the village and who are sort of underprivileged, so who maybe are struggling to have their school fees paid or uniforms or simple provisions. And even one job creates an entire stream of beneficiaries. So for us, it's a big deal. And impact in Africa is obviously necessary. And so it's a great question. I hope that addresses what you're asking.
I think we've observed in the Zambian market that there is a political cycle where after each political cycle you see different players in the market. So as an investor, how do you manage this political risk or political exposure in terms of business? Because you find that you invest in a business and the political environment changes, you see different players in the market.
Okay, that's a very good point and very good question. Trust me, we ponder on that still. It's the fundamental reality of our environment is that the vast majority of Zambian entrepreneurs who make overnight money always associated with a political party. If you look at the history of this country, from the MND days of the original, each president, you've got a group of cronies who, I don't want to go into too much into that, who, do a deal, it's got heavy government exposure. Obviously, government is the biggest employer, it's the biggest purchaser of goods and services. So naturally, it's an ideal candidate, it's an ideal client for any entrepreneur. Whether you're selling boots to the military, whether you're providing medical services or fire trucks or whatever, it's a big purchaser. So you can easily make a windfall as an entrepreneur with government as your client. And the only way you become get government to be your clients is if you're in favorable terms with them. And the sad reality in sub-Saharan Africa, it's not just exclusive to Zambia, is that you have to have some sort of allegiance with them, and I think it's a sad reality. I don't have any government exposure, fortunately. Thank God for that. I depend purely on the market. On if Better Now Finance is obviously being a meteorically rising company is depending on the fact that entrepreneurs are trading, are borrowing, and there's invoice discounting and so on. So at least there's no need to supply government or anything. And we purposely, and this is why even in our own internal governance, we review everything, every deal. What is part of our due diligence includes government exposure. Are we dealing with politically exposed people? Are we dealing with something that has some political risk associated with it? And we stay away from government connected deals, deals that have somebody who is prominently connected to the government. Because we also know that should anything change, if for example, you get into a business of supplying, let's say we manufacture fertilizer, and we know that that's a big purchase on the part of the Ministry of Agriculture. And we know that for us to continue this pipeline of business, we need this entrepreneur who runs the business to continue to be close to government. It changes, that business is done. So we don't want to depend, so I'd rather deal with the market. I mean, the way to look at it is what will continue to thrive with or without whoever's in power. And for me, I believe that every business person should belong to a party called AGIP. Have you guys heard of AGIP? Any government in power. So it's a joke, but you're not really supposed to care, who's in power. But what you should care more is about the consumer. Your everyday Zambian. If if I'm, a baker or doing bread, and at least it doesn't matter who's in government. People need to eat bread. I'm still going to make that bread. If I'm trading in alcohol, whatever, people. So that's why I think, to answer your question, after this sort of long-winded thing I just did, I think you need to focus really on the consumer, understand your market. Don't be in a situation where you're fully dependent on your relationship with government, because anything that could change, because as investors, we study every risk and anything that will change. So if there's a threat, it's in the SWOT analysis. If it shows government exposed, depending on government relationship, we're not going to touch it. So it should only depend on, will people continue to eat bread? Probably they will. Will people continue to use the phone from investing in a mobile phone company? Yes, they'll continue to do so. Will people need logistical services? Yes, they'll continue. I don't think they'll change that. Will people need healthcare services, access to healthcare, like iVitals? Of course they will. People, Zambia, we're an import-dependent country. People use .com. They use. So really, that's what it is. Yeah.
My name is Sam. I have a question. So I'm sure when you're looking at a lot of opportunities, you get exposed to a lot of different businesses, and I'm sure there are a lot of entrepreneurs who will be watching this. And I wanted to ask on their behalf as well, is in what areas do you see opportunity in Zambia? So that's the first one. Like, I know every market is different. So in Zambia, what sectors do you think are going to ride a growth trajectory? So that's the first thing. Then the second one is, how do you look at, so when we look at the tech space, sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch between what happens in Silicon Valley and here. How do you marry the excitement, the enthusiasm about tech, and also the reality about what's currently happening?
Okay. Very nice question. So, I don't know which one I should address first. Okay, just go. The one that's fresh on my mind is on the tech side. It really should always depend on how well you know your client, your clientele. So, obviously, number one, the biggest challenge we have right now in Zambia is the manner in which Zambians are able to consume tech products and also pay for them. Obviously, not many Zambians have credit cards, are not accustomed to credit cards. So, from a mass perspective, we don't yet have a situation where payment platforms are ubiquitous. Of course, Kazang and Airtel Money and Zona and MTN Money and all these different money sort of institutions are in place, but most of them are capitalizing off transfers. In fact, that's where the bulk of the money is made, is of me sending money to somebody in Kawambwa or something of that nature. But with regards to me, from a B2C perspective, where I'm now consuming your product. So you've got your iVitals business, and I want to, utilize your medical professional services using, an app that you created, and I need to pay for it using mobile money or a credit card. We're yet to marry that. There's a lot of studying going on right now. Obviously, I have an interest because of my exposure to a large sort of tech company, and So really, it's about gauging your market. I have seen businesses, I don't know if you guys are here, but there's a company I've seen, I can't go into details on it because of confidentiality, where they've found a very interesting niche between the market and how they access that good and how they process the transaction. And that's very exciting. So it has to be highly localized. One idea I was so excited about in the tech space, because it was a very local problem, is a young man, I don't want to say his name because I've said his name too much, was at Intercity and was seeing all the hustle and bustle, people trying to get bus tickets and struggling to get the ticket on time and so on. And he realized that I could solve this problem by creating an electronic ticketing platform. And that's a problem that's being solved with a local mindset. So I think the key is to localize the mindset. Yes, Silicon Valley, our friends are way ahead. I mean, that's a multi-trillion-dollar economy. People at a different level. We have to think of how do we create value for even people in the compounds. I mean, if you look at large companies like Simba Milling and Trade Kings, their biggest clients are in the compounds, and they've found that that's the mass market. Even though people are paying 2 kwacha at a time for their products, they're doing high volumes, though it's low margin, but it's high volume, so they're able to capitalize off that. So it's how do you create a solution for the high volume mass market? So you remind me about the first question again? Just
Opportunities.
opportunities. Yes, sorry. Opportunities. I'm excited about, I would say, 3 sectors. Number one is agriculture. I alluded to the fact that we have a very fast growing population, not only in Zambia, but Sub-Saharan Africa. We will exceed, in terms of by 2050-ish, Africa will have the largest population in the world compared to Asia and many other parts of the world. They need to consume. I just saw an amazing opportunity this past month in Kenya. They had a drought, they had an armyworm infestation. We are the only country in Sub-Saharan Africa that had a bumper harvest. So they were clamoring to come to us to provide them with the grain, maize, wheat, all this. So, and I realized that, man, if I was positioned, if I had storage facilities, if I had the logistics, if I had the primary aspect, which is, relationship to farmers who actually owned the farming business, I'd have made a killing because they were willing to pay a hectic premium on that. So for me, agriculture is number one. Obviously, value addition is also important. So that's converting the grain into something else, from grain to flour to something else to bread. So value addition is key, in addition to agriculture. Another is financial services. Our best performing portfolio company is a financial services company. People want to borrow money, including, we see from the demand we have, people wanting to access capital. It's such an important market. And I think what the growth area that I believe will really take us into a completely new level in terms of access to finance is on not banking, on these sophisticated companies, Kula, whatever. We're talking about companies that can lend to the marketeer, can lend to people in the mass markets, in the grassroots, in the rural areas, people who are doing farming and so on. The third is import substitution. So, and by that I mean anything that we're importing. We import everything in Zambia, almost everything. Mm-hmm. If you look at the mining sector, right, it's a massive, massive sector. The amount of money being deployed in that sector is incredible. Mm-hmm. We set up a company called Kukula Seed. It sits out in Solwezi. And that company, it basically creates companies that plug in holes in the mining supply chain. Mines needed to get starch from, I think, Australia. You can do starch there. We're not doing starch, but I know there's an entrepreneur doing it, so I commend him for that. So that's an import substitution opportunity. Silica sand. We are now mining silica. We're processing it. We're supplying the mines. As a way of plugging into the mining supply chain. So import substitution. People talk about, whether it be fabric. There's so much. It's almost an open. When I talk to people, I travel a lot. Talking to investors and so on, and from their perspective, they look at Zambia and say, man, they're sitting in economies that are highly developed, highly industrialized. Everything is there. The only way you can get to a point where you can make an incredible amount of money is if you do something so innovative that nobody else has ever created. Mm-hmm. Here, we don't even have to reinvent the wheel. We can even just create things that are already advanced outside and just replicate that model here. Mm-hmm. And that's why they come here and they thrive. We're talking foreign elements. And So really, we have a very big, beautiful pie. We have, this landmass of people who, we're about 750,000 hectares, of square kilometers, of land, with about roughly 17 million people. A person per hectare, if you look at the measure, it's the proportion compared to many other countries like Kenya, for example, who are extremely industrious in the way they do things, we're so favored in that regard. So I think we need a lot of introspection. We need a lot of government needs to play a part. And of course, I don't like government exposure, but the part they need to play is do a better job at creating an environment an enabling environment that enables entrepreneurs to be part of these, perhaps you can call them industrial zones, which I know they've created with Lusaka South and a few others, where Zambian entrepreneurs go in and get certain concessions for being part of it, preferential procurement for certain products and services. That bolsters our own capacity to make reasonable top line on anything within this market. So that's really where it's at. It's those three: import substitution, agriculture mostly, value creation within the agriculture sector, and financial services, of course. Obviously, as a venture capital company, we are registered as securities exchange brokers. We're investment advisors as well, and fully regulated. And an extension of that is that we're also designated advisors on the Lusaka Stock Exchange. I'm also a broker on that. So with that, we're able to look at SMEs on the Alt-M. The Alt-M doesn't yet have companies, on its bourse, as we call it. And the reason is really there's certain criteria. You need to have a certain number of employees, certain turnover. There's a certain scale you have to get to, which most entrepreneurs haven't gotten to. And I think it requires a lot of sensitization. We're entertaining proposals for us to help people, list their company on the alternative exchange. I think there has to be greater outreach in the market, financial literacy and, capital markets and sensitization. And I think I'm partly to blame because I'm a capital market agent. I need to sort of do more. I guess maybe I'm doing it now, so I guess I'm fulfilling that requirement. But as an exchange, Luce, SEC, and all the other capital markets players need to spend more time in the public eye, and instead of the headlines being this person did this from a political perspective, let the headlines be more Alt-M launched, raise money. That's my dream. Is the day that the front page of the Daily Mail can talk about an investment story, not where it's in the back, buried somewhere. So that's I don't know if that answers your question, but it's really an open. If you want to have more details, you're welcome to reach me. My contact details on the website, KukulaCapital.com. If you have an SME that you want to list, I can give you more details on the process. There's quite a bit of information you need to get that done. Okay, so I'll put it this way: we were young, right? Inexperienced, excited, eager to prove that this works. We had raised the first $4 million, and we wanted to just deploy, and anything that came, we're like, let's just do it. I don't care. So there was a business. It was a service company. It was doing some mine services. We had to liquidate it because we didn't do enough due diligence on the entrepreneur. Money was lost because people were just using it for sorts of things. We didn't have the systems in place. Our team was small. Our team has grown significantly. The quality of our team, and that's another thing I actually wanted to mention. Every entrepreneur, apart from yourself, you see, in Zambia we like to own 100% of something. I think it's so much better to own even 10% of something extraordinary than 100% of something insignificant. Whether it be from a shareholding perspective or even from a management perspective. And I believe in partnerships. I believe so much in leveraging on other people's capacity. Like I mentioned, what I'm so excited about, I've been dreaming about this for years. I used to tell people, even when I was a kid in Canada, it's like, when I go back to my country, I'm going to be doing big infrastructure projects, energy. And, today, I go to the northern province. From the very beginning, from the primary stage of doing the hydrological studies and the capacity of the area to create hydropower, to raising the capital, to putting all the, not only from a legal and other and capital raising side, but even from a technical side, bringing all the expertise, bringing all the different EPC contractors. These are it's for the engineering, procurement, and construction to come and put it up, and negotiating with ZESCO and just getting the whole thing done. To me, I just love that whole process, and it's based on the fact that I'm leveraging other people's skills. I don't have the capacity to do that myself. I have to bring in other people, and the lesson I learned was, lean on people, depend on people, trust. If you're lucky enough to have people you can trust, lean on, trust them to do it, because as human beings we've got only finite capacity. There's only so much we can do in a day, so much our brain can take in from a memory perspective, that knowledge we can retain. If I want to be exposed to the e-commerce side, I know that somebody has put his heart into it, so I can just have a small piece of that company and know that that's going to thrive. If I want to be in mining or like Post.net, which it does business services and others, or Foxdale Court or things of that nature, I'm essentially leveraging on those people's capacity. So be open to forging partnerships with people, build each other, and don't be sort of selfish and sit on an opportunity on your own and think you can make it on your own. Because once you're gone, it's like the whole thing is dead. And that's why we need to set up a legacy. Because I believe that Kukula will exist with or without me. I know it for a fact because of the team that we have in place. We've got a strong board, strong partnership, strong sort of deal flow, internal sort of corporate culture. And I hope that one day when I retire, my kids and their grandkids will enjoy the benefits of the shareholding in the different companies that are in the company. Similar to, you have people like, I think, Paris Hilton and people like that running around the world having fun because of things that her great-grandfather did 100 years ago, setting up hotels and so on. And she doesn't even know how it works, what the business model is, but she, is eating from it. Yeah. So I feel like we all need to think about the future as well. Save, not spend recklessly. I'll give you an example. I live a very simple life. I remember, I live in the same apartment I did at the time when my income was probably even 2% of what it is now. Because I just don't feel like I need to upgrade yet. Because I still need to invest more. I need to get myself to a certain level before I can now, start enjoying it.
I'm curious, Jito, what does success mean to you?
Okay, whenever I get very shy when people ask me things of that nature. I remember about 2 years ago when I was made a director on the Airtel board. I think that's a question I used to get asked all the time because no one had ever seen a person of my age be in a position like that. So number one, I attribute it to God. I think there's a reason that I was placed in a situation of this nature. It is for me to be a blessing to others. So for me, success is, yes, I like it. Nobody can not making money, right? Making money is a good thing, but I think impact is important. I think the number of people you touch, in a legal way, not the Donald Trump way, right? No. When I say touch, I mean you employ, that you enable to sort of build. Like there's people. I can tell you right now, there's entrepreneurs who, if I didn't meet them, I probably would be maybe 10 steps behind or 5 steps behind. But because of 2-3 things that they said to me, that stuck and that took me forward. So I'm a product of some of even things that they weren't even thinking about. They just uttered it randomly. And I'm like, wow, because I look up to these people. So I want to be able to do that to others. I want to create, millionaires. I want people, Zambians, to be successful. So for me, success is the number of people I can help become successful. And the more people that are successful, then I will go to sleep at night saying, I've done something. I'm immortalized. My biggest mentor is someone who I've never met him. Someone who died like 100 years ago, called Andrew Carnegie. There's a book that he inspired called Think and Grow Rich. And his principle was, a man will become rich if he enables others to become rich too. So, and that's the thing I love about venture capital, is that your wealth is dependent on the success of others. If Mahano fails, or a number of other companies, the 9 different companies we invested in fail, then I fail. But if they succeed, they obviously succeed as entrepreneurs, and so do I. So I think the key really is enabling others to be successful, leaving that level of a mark where I could be long gone 200 years from now, which obviously is going to be the case. But the things that I did in 2017 or 2020 or whatever is always going to be there. That this 57 megawatt power plant was this guy's dream and it came together, or this shopping mall or that little company there, so really it's about legacy. So to me, success really has to be about legacy and creating versions of yourself, which is other Zambian people who are of a completely optimal and excellent mentality. I think we have to, I mentioned optimal productivity, being highly focused, being highly competent, because if we do that, we will change the game. We could do 10% annual growth in our GDP. And to me, that's my dream, is because I used to be shy about the fact that when I was, in North America, and the microcosm that cities like Montreal are of the global scheme of things, is that you're exposed to different people from different parts of the world, from Asia, South America, Europe, and so on. And you're from Africa, and everything you see on TV about Africa is negative. You're talking about war, poverty, disease. But to be, even if I add every year a few basis points to Zambia's GDP, I can be proud of myself as a result, regardless of what I am taking from my business that enables me to enjoy life and so on. So that's really what success means to me.
Okay. And finally, your last advice to the startup companies out there?
Okay, so success is a cocktail of different elements. There's so many things that are factored into what enables a person to be successful. Consistency, persistence, hard work. There's no substitute for hard work. There's some sacrifices you have to make. And like I said, as human beings, we've got finite capacity. So we have to be able to, if you are accustomed to having a musty after work every day, and you want to be a millionaire, you have to choose which one you want to do. I made a decision many years ago. I never drank at all. Now I can have a small drink here and there occasionally. Sacrificed so much of my time. My social life sucked. I was just a complete nerd, just focusing on working with my colleagues, loving what I do, being passionate about what I do, driven and learning, taking time out to read, I listen to all sorts of, not only YouTube videos, but audiobooks and so on, and just learning different principles, learning about competence. Obviously, I didn't manufacture what I was talking about competence, somebody else did. So, and the wheel, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, it's already created. The key is to look for it, seek and you will find. And, people talk about books that enable a person to be successful and so on, like Think and Grow Rich and many others. I love this new book called Principles by Ray Dalio. But to me, again, I don't want to sound corny, I don't want to sound preachy, but the Bible has enormous elements of success, about treating people. If you are a person with empathy and you treat people the way you want to be treated, from a business perspective, you can be very successful, because your ability to have empathy and do, as you want to be treated, is you enable better customer service, better service delivery, because that's what you expect. So I feel like that's really the path I chose. I don't, people can choose how they want to sort of achieve their level of success, but for me, that works for me. And it's proven, it's something I continue to hold on to. I'm not a perfect person, but consistency really is the hallmark of success and many other elements. So I think for me, really just continue to seek guidance and implement, execute, and be complete. I've had so many situations where entrepreneurs come with, with all due respect to those entrepreneurs, and a completely incomplete, I guess proposal. When I say proposal, not from a documentation perspective, where you ask questions that you just don't have answers to. So you have to be thorough in what you're doing, be clear, be focused, and just put all your hearts into it. I follow the sunset rule. There's certain goals I have every morning. I get up really early, roughly about 4:40 in the morning. I have to plan my day. There's certain tasks. If I don't achieve them, I'm going to be depressed. It's going to slow. So I have to, before sunset, those tasks have to be achieved. If I don't, I have to co-opt others to do it. And just remembering that I've got a reputation to uphold. That's another reason why certain deals can be done, because of people having that faith and trust. So build your character, because your character will take you to, your talent could take you to where your character can sustain you. So you need to have a strong character to sustain success. That's really my last word.
Thank you so much for coming, Jito.
Thank
It's
you.
been awesome.